whatever, let's get into this. So the first film I want to be talking about it came out on HBO Max, or I think Warner Brothers release, right? The Warner Brother films are being released on HBO Max. I'm probably completely fucking wrong, but one of the first films that I watched that it was on HBO Max that came out this year is called The Little Things. It's right, The Little Things. It came out on January 29th, and I watched it on that day. I think that was Saturday. It's about this sheriff deputy played by Denzel Washington named Joe Deacon. He's a deputy sheriff in Kern County in California, and then he's sent to Los Angeles to recover some evidence for some unrelated case to the story, I think. And it's his old precinct that he used to work at, and he discovers that a new crime has been committed from a case that he has been haunting him and is kind of the reason where he's at in his life. So, and he kind of gets involved with another up-and-coming investigator, detective, who's played by Rami Malek. And they kind of work together to try to solve this certain case about these killings of, young girls. And that's kind of the premise that I'm going to reveal, and that's the synopsis. Like I said, Denzel Washington is the main lead. Rami Malek's in it. If you don't know who Rami Malek is, he's in that Mr. Robot show. He's also in The Pacific, which are two of his best performances. And also Jared Leto is in this film as well. It's written and directed by John Lee Hancock. If you don't know who he is, because I didn't know who he was. He's I think he wrote The Blind Side. And he directed Saving Mr. Banks, which is probably the two biggest and probably best films that he's involved in. I thought Saving Mr. Banks is a really quality film. I think The Blind Side's a little bit overrated. I mean, that's just my opinion. I think mainly everyone remembers that film for Sandra Bullock's performance. You protect his blind side. Like, come on now. I mean, it's a decent film. I don't want to throw any unnecessary shade at The Blind Side, but I don't know. It's all right. But so this film, I just kind of want to go over like where my thoughts were before watching this and my expectations. It's a January release, so your expectations kind of need to be down a little bit, because January release movies are usually not the greatest, even though I feel like we've had some surprises in the recent years. Split was a January release. A film that came out this year that's actually in my top 10 of 2020 came out in January. So, but I reviewed the trailer on here, and I said it kind of looked promising, but I hope it didn't spoil anything, which it doesn't, by the way. Which is kind of a good and bad thing, which I'll go over a little bit in this review. But I also didn't hear anything that good on Twitter when I did see or read certain things about this film. I didn't see really anything good about it, so my expectations were pretty low going into this. Now, the film itself, let's get into the specifics here a little bit. I think overall, the film has a very promising and intriguing beginning, but is definitely a slow burn of a film, and it inevitably doesn't really go anywhere that's interesting. It's kind of it's disappointingly mediocre in a way and pretty forgettable. So, but I feel like the film does do certain things decently well. Like I said, the beginning is promising. The opening scene is quite suspenseful, but again, it kind of references or throws back to an awesome film that's in the similar genre, Zodiac. If you've seen Zodiac, if you remember the scenes that are involved with the actual killer, the Zodiac killer, in those scenes, which are the most suspenseful scenes of the film, that's the vibe that I got out of the beginning. And unfortunately, the beginning's kind of probably the scariest or the most suspenseful scene of the film, which is, you don't really want that. But yeah, I mean, again, it's intriguing at first and has some promise. I'm like, oh, cool. let's see where this goes. And that got me through the rest of the film. But again, it's the first time I watched it, so I was kind of expecting something. The performances by all three actors are fine. They're decent. They're far from each actor's best. I mean, Denzel Washington, I understand he's getting old, and he's definitely not the most desired actor in Hollywood anymore, which is unfortunate because I think he's still a really quality, good actor. But, I mean, this is far from his best performance. I mean, Denzel has a plethora of iconic, amazing performances in his backlog, and this is definitely not going to be up there with one of them. Rami Malek as well. I mean, his performances in The Pacific and Mr. Robot are way better than this one. And Jared Leto, even. I think Jared Leto might actually have the best performance in this film. But again, it's still kind of like a play off of John Doe in Seven, which is kind of summarizes this entire film. This whole film, The Little Things, is pretty much just a discount Seven, which is unfortunate. We'll get into a little bit more about that. But yeah, Jared Leto, kind of gives a decent performance. I think definitely the best, but it's not even his best. I mean, say what you will about Jared Leto, but I mean, his performances in Requiem for a Dream and Dallas Buyers Club are hands down way better than this one, and more compelling at least. The film shot decently well, but like, again, nothing that stands out to me, I mean, shit, I even said it's shot in the Night Stalker documentary, which, if you've seen my review on the Night Stalker documentary, you know how I feel about it. Even that documentary has a shot that stuck with me, and this one, there's really nothing. Weirdly enough, the Night Stalker is actually mentioned in this film, like in the very beginning, and as soon as that happened, I was like, oh shit, here we go. I was like, uh-oh, not great vibes already. I mean, if you know my opinion on the Night Stalker, I highly recommend going back and checking out my review for it. I think it's pretty entertaining. It's a fun just look at some dude rant about how much a random meaningless documentary like made him mad. So check that one out. I think it's a fun video. I think I did pretty well. But yeah, I mean, the genre has... I love the genre. Like, I love the suspense thriller genre. But, so it has that going for it. I mean, I love films in this genre, like Seven or Zodiac or a lot of Fincher films. Like, they can be really good. But again, like, this film doesn't really... We'll get into what this film doesn't really do too well. I mean, some of these films, some of the scenes there's some comedic elements to this film, but like, again, you don't, like, when you're a suspense thriller, you don't want the most memorable parts of your film to be your comedic elements. Like, the most memorable scene in this film is like an ass joke in the very beginning. And like, this is a suspense thriller. That's not what you want your film to be memorable for. You're not a comedy. So those moments, it's like, it kind of hurts the film a little bit, especially when you're trying to establish a tone. So, I mean, unfortunately, everything that I just said that is positive about the film is kind of like, I kind of give a caveat to it, but that's kind of unfortunately it for what I think the film does particularly well. So let's get into what I feel like the film doesn't do well. Like, I already kind of went over, like, it doesn't do anything particularly poorly or like really bad. It's just kind of mediocre and forgettable, and that's kind of a huge problem when you're a suspense thriller. When you're forgettable, that means it's kind of a boring film. And I described it as a slow burn, but I think that kind of works in two ways to describe the film. Like, I would say this film is like if someone who didn't know how to build a fire try to build a fire. Like, the director here and writer, John Lee Hancock, I feel like watched Seven and Zodiac and was like, I'm going to make a movie exactly like that, but like doesn't know how to make a movie like Seven and Zodiac. Like, that's kind of how I feel about this film. Like, it's a slow burn, but like, films that have been described as slow burns, like maybe like Blade Runner or The Shining or most recent Hereditary, like, yeah, those films are slow burns. Like The Witch, they're slow burns, but like eventually they burn, you know? Like they become these giant ass, like monstrous house fires, like by the end. And this film just kind of like, it's like some small campfire that never really got going, you know? Which is unfortunate because if your film is described as a slow burn, then it's not particularly exciting and fast paced in the beginning. And if it doesn't eventually burn, then it never gets to that. And like this film does have like a holy shit reveal twist moment, but when I was watching that, I was just like, okay, you know, cool. And like that, I said, I hope the trailer doesn't spoil the twist for me. You know, it doesn't. And this goes back to me, it's like, yeah, that's good. Like, I don't want the trailer to spoil the film for me, but like the twist that I thought was going to happen, I think probably would have been better, you know? And the filmmakers, I feel like, would have had a little bit more balls to do it. It would need to have a little bit more balls to do that. You know, like this film is constantly like compared to Seven, but like Seven had fucking balls, man. Like if you've seen Seven and you know what's in the fucking box, you know that film has balls. Because that was the original end, and the studios wanted that to change, but Fincher and Brad Pitt was like, we're not making this film if we can't have that ending. So, you know, thank God they did that, because that ending lives in infamy. You know, if you haven't seen Seven, watch Seven. It's amazing. It's in my top 100. I've talked about it already. But like this film doesn't do that. Like it doesn't like make you go like, holy shit. It just kind of makes you go like, okay, all right, cool. I mean, dark, I guess, but like could have been a lot darker, you know? And that's kind of what I wanted. You know, I wanted this film to go there, commit. And it doesn't. And like the ending climax, like, is just kind of like, meh. And even copy Seven, like the major characters drive out to like the middle of fucking nowhere of a desert to look for a body that the supposed killer says they put there. Like it's literally exactly like the Seven's ending. It's kind of hilarious. You know, I'm not going to spoil anything about the climax of what happens there, but like that's what happens. And it's like, wow, you really are going for this Seven feel, but like you haven't built the tone up, and it's not like, this isn't dark enough, you know, this is not fucked up enough to be Seven. Like, come on, bro, like commit, have some fucking balls a little bit. I mean, I'm throwing a lot of shade at this film, I'm just saying, but like also like the ending sort of has this like, oh, like we're going to tie some things up in a little bow and like kind of perceive to our audience that this does have some closure. But then you think about it and you're like, no, this has no closure, because there's no point to the film. Like at the very end, you're just kind of like, what the fuck was the point of this? Like nothing gets really solved, you know? And like, once this thing happens again, which it's going to, because the ending of the film just ends up being pointless, like the characters are just going to revert back to where they were at the very beginning, or even worse than that. So it like, you're just left scratching your head, is like, what the fuck was the point? And that's not something you want your ending to make your audience feel. So also another random gripe I had, like Jared Leto's character like has this weird fucking like cosmetic like to make him look like he has a beer belly or like fat, and it was just so distracting to me, because Jared Leto's like one of the like thinnest guys ever. Like he's a notoriously skinny person. Like he's really skinny. So like, and like just putting this like fat suit thing on him and like making kind of like walk like a fat person. It's like you can tell by looking at me, like my hands and my arms and probably my neck area is like, yeah, I'm a fat dude. Like I'm not a skinny person. Like you can tell that. When you look at Jared Leto, you can tell he's a skinny person, and like putting this like fat beer belly thing around him is just so distracting to me, and it just took me out of it. Like, come on, man. Like as the director, you need to be like, you know what? Like, I don't think we really need to have a beer. Like, what was the point of having a beer belly? I was watching the film. I was like, what's the point of having that? Like, why does Jared Leto need to have like a fat suit around his waist? It doesn't make any sense. It was something random and weird that bothered me, and it's just like, I don't know. It's like, I feel like if I was a filmmaker, I was like, we don't need this. It looks weird. Like, scrap it. But they didn't for some reason. So overall, the film, it's not horrible. Like, it's not particularly bad, but like, it's not good either. And it just ends up being in this middle ground of like just being mediocre and forgettable. So does it have the movie magic to me? No, it doesn't. And I'm trying to like up my qualifications for movie magic because I think it should be a heavy stamp of it's a stamp of my approval. You know, it's a film that like, oh, this is a quality film, or this is a quality film that I'm going to rewatch, or it's just a good movie. And this is just not a good movie. Like, at all. Like, it doesn't have a point. It doesn't really have a message. It's not particularly suspenseful or entertaining. Like, it's just kind of meh. And honestly, that's even worse than your film being absolute shit. Because at least if a film's absolute shit, you can have fun with it, you know? Like A Room or Batman and Robin. Like, those films are so bad that they're kind of good, you know? And so, yeah, like I've already said, like it's a discount 7. Like the director just tried to make a 7 ripoff, and which is unfortunate, you know. But, you know, that's kind of how I feel about the film. And yeah, really disappointed. And my expectations were pretty fucking low. So, yeah. Hello there. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you're unfamiliar with this channel, this is Nerd Out Sanctuary. I'm your host, Michael. What do I talk about, you say? Well, I talk about anything nerdy. So that's movies, video games, TV shows, comic books every once in a while. Books, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Anything that I feel like talking about. I'm a huge nerd. I hope you're a huge nerd, and I hope we can enjoy our nerdiness together here. This is a full audio podcast available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, the major podcast platforms. So consider going over to those and checking out the full version of the episode. And other past episodes, please leave me a review and subscribe on those platforms. If you don't want to do that, clipped, shorter versions of those full episodes will be posted here on YouTube. So consider subscribing and liking the videos for more to support me and future content that I will be producing in the future on nerdy stuff. So yeah, thank you, and see you on the next one.